Hey guys, I hope you're all well and I hope you're staying safe. So, in this video, as promised, I'm going to be bringing you the top 15 horror movie cliches. I've managed to narrow this down. It was quite a tricky list to do, so obviously I'm going to be starting with number 15 and then narrowing it down to number 1. So let's get started. Kicking off the list with number 15 is running in a straight line. This one is, I wouldn't say is as bad as the others on the list. The other ones on the list just really boil my piss, they really do. That rhymes. But running in a straight line. Now, this doesn't only happen in horror movies, but it is popular in that genre, let's say that. It could be a car chasing someone down the road, or it could be a killer chasing someone through a wooded area. Or, I dare even say this, a derelict spaceship that has crash landed on a planet and begins to roll in the same direction as Charlize Theron. Look, running in a straight line is not your only direction. You can go left, you can go right. The amount of times that this has happened and I've ended up shouting at my TV screen in frustration, go in a different direction. Go in a different direction. Number 14 is no cell phone reception. God. Okay. I guess if there was cell phone reception, the characters would phone for help and they would have an easy escape. But then again, that movie, in that scenario, would be pretty boring. The reason for having no cell phone reception is that the characters are in an isolated area. Another cliche that falls into this category is when the characters look at their phone and the battery has either died or is almost dying. And one more thing that really bugs me. I've seen some pretty modern horror movies, and the scenario will be the same. The characters will be in an isolated area, they'll pull out their cell phone, and it's a really outdated cell phone. It could be either a flip phone or a phone that resembles a Nokia. Like, seriously, we're in the 21st century. Get with the times. Moving on to number 13, and even though we're early on number 13, this one really bugs the shit out of me. Shoot them in the head. Now, I'm specifically talking about zombie movies now. Look, the amount of time that I've seen zombie movies, and I've lost count how many times I've shouted at my screen in frustration, shoot them in the head. I recently found myself doing this whilst watching the movie Burial Ground, and believe me, that is a zombie flick that you need to watch with a group of friends. You could practically play a drinking game with that film. Every time that a cliche appears on screen, take a shot. Believe me, by the end of it, you'll be pissed out of your head. So, in that movie, the character George has a gun. And he tells the Walking Dead to stay back. And that's another thing that really, really pisses me off, because why do people try to reason with zombies? In fact, that should be a cliche within itself. That should have been on the list. In fact, I should have put it on the honourable mentions. So, George tries to tell the ghouls to stay back. So he shoots them in the chest. That, of course, does nothing, because shooting a zombie in the chest doesn't do anything. You'd think, by this point, he would think to himself, I've shot them in the chest. It's not working. I'll shoot them in the head. No, he continues to waste bullets by shooting them even more in the chest. And what do you know, by the end of it, he's dead. One thing I must point out is that George A. Romero got this right from the get-go. In Night of the Living Dead, the character Ben was a really smart character. And in fact, I would have to say he's probably my second favourite character in Romero's Dead trilogy, the original Dead trilogy. First being Captain Rhodes, because he's just an ultimate badass and he's got the best zombie death to probably ever appear on film. But Ben was such a smart character. In Night of the Living Dead, Ben would shoot the ghouls in the chest. Then he would realise that this is not keeping them down. So he would finish them off by putting a bullet in their head. That is why Ben was a smart character. This is something that other zombie movies now lack of. Speaking of Ben, I will get onto him later on in the video. Coming in at number 12 is the police arrive when it's too late. Now usually, whenever the police are alerted, they arrive at the scene. But by this point, it's the end of the movie and every other character has already died. I can't think of a film where the police actually take down the killer. The only film that really comes to mind is An American Werewolf in London. The police officers at the end of that movie, they were on it. They were really smart. Again, something that other horror movies lack of. The police officers in An American Werewolf in London were ready to take down the Kessler werewolf. If Alex hadn't have jumped in, the police would have eventually cornered David and they would have shot him. In fact, they were about to, but Alex jumped in and tried to reason with David. But in the end, the police ended up killing David anyway. But that's good because they were smart police officers. And this is why I say that they are the only smart police officers in horror movies. But moving back to the cliche itself. Usually in these cliched horror movies, the police officers will say, stay where you are, remain quiet, and, help is on the way. What does the character end up doing? They hear a noise, they go to a different location, and they end up getting themselves killed. Coming in at number 11 is checking to see if the killer is dead. Basically what will happen is the killer gets knocked on their feet and plays dead. Then the killer springs up, the protagonist might then scream and run away. But instead of turning around and running away, I've seen some movies where the character will run past the killer when the killer is still on the ground. Now how can this be solved? I know. How about, once you've knocked the killer down, I don't know, run away? Or better yet, kill him! Stupid characters. Okay, now we're into the top 10. So number 10 is sneaking up on your friend and startling them. Now, to get someone's attention, have you ever sneaked up on your friend and slowly put your hand on their shoulder? No, I don't think you ever have, because evidently it's stupid and it just ends up startling them. Usually this will happen in horror movies where someone is looking for someone else in a dimly lit room or anywhere. It's usually in a dimly lit room for some reason. And that's one thing actually. Obviously I'm reading this off a script, but it's just come to me. The character's looking for someone in a dimly lit room. Why would you even do that in a dark room? You're bound to scare them anyway. This just makes this cliche even worse than it already is. So basically, it'll be in a dark room or a dimly lit room, and a hand will slowly come into frame from behind the person in front, and then, oh, don't do that, you scared me. Yeah, no fucking shit. Coming in at number 9 is I'll Be Right Back. Obviously made popular and even made fun of in the movie Scream. In that movie, the character Randy told you exactly not what to do. He is us, he's the audience, whilst watching the movie. When someone says, I'll be right back, you know for a fact that sometimes they might not even return. And when they don't return, you know exactly what happens next. And I'm about to tell you. Let's split up. Now, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. Look, any person in the right mind would go looking for their friend if they found out that they went missing. If they didn't, I would consider them heartless bastards. But it's been done so many times in horror films. My second favourite horror film falls victim to this cliche, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Not once, but twice. Even my all-time favourite horror film, The Evil Dead, falls victim to this cliche. Look, whenever this cliche happens in horror movies, you know what I think of? Scooby-Doo. That's it. Next one. Coming in at number 7 is The Killer Gets the Last Laugh. Now, this is a very popular cliche. Well, mind you, they're all popular cliches that I've picked. But this one happens in mainstream horror movies. Basically with this one, the victim will kill the killer, or so they think, and that's it. They think, oh, it's all over. I'm safe. The victim will then leave their current location, and the killer shows up before the end credits. Or maybe the killer will vanish, and then the end credits will roll. The horror movies that fall to this cliche are, most notably, the Halloween franchise, Friday the 13th franchise, Nightmare on Elm Street, Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and yet again, my all-time favourite horror film, The Evil Dead. Actually, also the first Wrong Turn movie falls victim to this cliche as well. I've just thought of that and I didn't put it on the list. Ding! Moving on to number 6 is no matter how fast you run, the killer will always walk faster. A character will be confronted by the killer and run away and hide. But the killer chooses to walk after the victim, and without fail, the killer will always catch up with them. Michael Myers is probably the most famous horror movie killer to fall victim to this cliche. Jason Voorhees, on the other hand, did actually run in Friday the 13th Parts 2 and 3, but in the later sequels, he decided to walk. I actually think it would be more scary if Jason decided to run through the later sequels. Jason's a big bulking monster and it would make it more scary if he ran after his victims. This is one thing I can actually praise the remake for, because they made Jason super threatening and really scary. I mean, can you imagine if Leatherface slowly walked after his victims? Wouldn't be as scary, would it? Speaking of Leatherface, we're in the top 5 now, so number 5 is the film which you are about to see is based on true events. Now, I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop myself right there. Whatever, I'm going to stop right there. What the film actually means by this is that the film which you are about to see is partly based on true events. Can you imagine if the opening crawl to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre said something like this? The film which you are about to see is partly based on true events. It doesn't work. It's not as good of a slogan as the film which you are about to see is based on true events. Of course, the main killer in this is Leatherface, who was inspired by real-life serial killer Ed Gein. Gein would commit absolutely brutal and gruesome crimes from 1954 to 1957. Ed Gein would actually wear his victims' faces as a mask and their skin as a bodysuit. In my mind, Ed Gein is the most brutal, gruesome, and, I'll put it briefly, fucked up serial killer that ever lived. Also, the house in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is heavily inspired by Ed Gein's real house. Investigators would find human bones, skulls, and severed heads. If that wasn't disturbing enough, Ed Gein would actually make furniture out of bones and skin. 2 other famous horror films would also be loosely based on Ed Gein, and they are Psycho and The Silence of the Lambs. Coming in at number 4 is Sex Equals Death. Now, to quote Randy from Scream, there are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, rule number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no, big no-no. Sex equals death, okay? And Randy is 100% correct. All horror fans know this already. If there's a couple in a horror movie getting a bit naughty, then we as an audience know that they're both going to die. The franchise that falls to this victim the most is the Friday the 13th series. But this cliche was actually later revived in the later Wrong Turn sequels. Okay, moving on to number 3, I have a lot to say about this one because it's the cliche that I hate the most. And number 3 is that the black guy always dies. I absolutely despise this cliche. For instance, as much as I love Night of the Living Dead, the cliche falls to this film big time. Ben, played by Dwayne Jones, is my favourite character in the movie. And like I said before, he is definitely the strongest character. At the end of the movie, everybody has practically died. Every character in the movie has died. And the townsfolk, along with the sheriff, arrive at the farmhouse to wipe out the remaining ghouls.
He's the dead one. Get up here!
Ben comes out of hiding from the cellar. He goes into the living room, looks out of the window, and sees that the townsfolk have arrived.
You, drag that out of here and throw it on the fire. Nothing down here. All right, go ahead down and give him a hand. Let's go check out the house, man. There's something there. I heard a noise.
Then, as he looks out of the window, he's shot in the head.
All right, Vince, hit him in the head, right between the eyes. Good shot. Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
What makes this scenario even worse is that after he is shot in the head, his body is disposed of by the townsfolk throwing it onto a fire. I saw this film for the first time when I was quite young, I can't remember what age, and I always thought to myself, did they kill him because he was black? As I got older and I rewatched the film, I later discovered that the film secretly does tackle with racism, but this is not what George A. Romero intended at all. However, when I saw the remake of Night of the Living Dead, Ben is played superbly by Tony Todd. He does a great job of stepping in the same shoes as Dwayne Jones. In the remake, I was really hoping that Ben would ultimately survive, but he doesn't. He becomes a zombie and he gets shot. Now, obviously this is a different way to dispose the character. In fact, I think it is a lot better of how he was disposed in the original, but instead he becomes a zombie, and it's Barbara who survives the night. As much as I love the original Night of the Living Dead, and I mean for many reasons it paved the way for more zombie movies to come later on, but the remake I think is actually more superior. But I digress. Thankfully, when George A. Romero directed Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, the two characters in that movie, John and Peter, actually survived until the end of the movie, and that's another thing that I absolutely love, because John and Peter in those two movies were absolutely brilliant. John in Day of the Dead, cracking jokes all the time alongside the Irishman, was really good, and John is actually a really good, well-developed character. Peter, well, say no more. Peter is probably the best character in Dawn of the Dead. Even in Land of the Dead, again directed by George A. Romero, the main zombie in that movie, Big Daddy, would end up surviving with the rest of the zombies until the end of the movie, much like Bub in Day of the Dead. It seems that this cliche now is slowly starting to die down, and I think it began with Jordan Peele's Get Out. In that movie, the main character Chris and his friend Rod actually survive until the end of the film. And again, when Jordan Peele directed Us, the entire family in that movie survives. So I'm really glad that this cliche isn't as strong as what it used to be, because I actually found it to be really unneeded. Okay, we're coming close to the end of the video now, and I'm sure if you're all watching, you're like, oh, come on, just get on with it. What's number one? Well, we're on number two. Women always falling over in horror movies. Again, I hate this one. And yet again, I'm going to bring up Night of the Living Dead because, as we all know, Barbara in that movie, not only is she whiny, she crashes the car. She also ends up falling over her shoe. She then ends up taking off her shoes to run away. Many horror films fall to this trope, and there's way too many to count. I brought up Burial Ground near the start of this video, and it happens in that movie too. I guess for the audience it brings up tension when the victim falls over. It's like, oh quick, the killer's coming closer, get up, run away. But people don't end up doing that. They end up shouting, run the fuck away! Just don't bother doing anything else, just get up and run. But they can't get up and run, because once they fall down, they just sort of slump on the ground, look awkwardly, and then they think, shouldn't I be running? Yeah, I should probably, run away now. It's ridiculous. I guess this cliche is kind of similar to sneaking up on your friend or running in a straight line. Because in reality, if you are running, whatever the situation, yeah, you might stumble, but you're not always going to constantly fall over. Now with number 2 out of the way, let's move on to number 1. Okay, here we are, finally, we're at number 1. The most used horror movie cliche out of them all. And if you've been watching this video and you're still here, thank you by the way, and you've been thinking to yourself, where's this cliche? Well, here it is. Number 1, the jump scare. Sorry if that got you, and if it didn't, congratulations. If it did, sorry, I had to do it. Without a doubt, the jump scare is the most used cliche in all horror movies. You could say that it originated in 1942 with a little film called Cat People. In that movie, there's a scene. It's all quiet, but there's slight background noise. The main character, Irina, thinks she's being stalked, so she runs away, but then she comes to a halt. The scene is then interrupted by a loud screech, and it's a bus pulling up alongside Irina. The jump scare in Cat People works so well because it's so misleading. And since then, the jump scare cliche has been used in horror movies so many times. Sometimes it works really well, other times not so much. It's actually used the most in what I would consider paranormal movies, such as the Paranormal Activity franchise, the Conjuring franchise, Insidious, Lights Out, The Babadook, and way too many more to count. Even the classic horror movies fall trope to this. The endings to Friday the 13th parts 1 and 2 fall victim to this cliche. And it doesn't even stop in horror movies. Horror-based video games use this tactic also. Even videos on this platform that you are watching this video right now, YouTube, uses this cliche as well. The first jump scare video to ever be released on YouTube was for a set of German Kaffee commercials. So it was even used in that area also. And then from there you would have videos like the Scary Maze game, and that really upped the ante for videos that would feature jump scares. But as opposed to the Kaffee commercials, this commercial in particular was named Auto, and it shows a car driving down a peaceful lane full of green trees and bushes with calming background music. Then the car would drive behind a tree and it would stay there for the remainder of the video. And I guess this slowly lures the viewers in because they then look at their screen and think, where's the car? I can't see the car, where's it gone? And then it startles you. It really does, and it works so well because, again, it's misleading. With the calming background music, you think this isn't going to be anything. It's a calming commercial, maybe for a car. But no, it was a commercial for energy drinks. I love their slogan because it says, "Ever been so wide awake?" There we go. It's used so cleverly. And I think the reason why some jump scares don't work is because they're not misleading. You can see them coming a mile away. There's been times where I've been watching films and I'm thinking, oh, there's going to be a jump scare. There's going to be a jump scare. I'm telling you, there's going to be a jump scare. Oh, yeah, what do you know? Because you can see it coming a mile away. People who aren't even horror movie fans know there's going to be a jump scare. At the end of the day, the jump scare is the most used horror movie cliche, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So finally, there we go guys, that has been my top 15 horror movie cliches. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I certainly love talking about these cliches and showing you my frustration as I do so. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. Also, post some comments in the comment section of what you thought of my thoughts and what are your most hated horror movie cliches. What are the ones that get you the most? And to stay notified for future content, why not click that notification bell down below? And if you haven't already, why not subscribe? Okay then guys, I will see you in the next video, and as always, take care.